Hello, curious soul. So today we're using flexing our intuitive muscles and having another look at someone else in the public eye. Today we're looking at Russell Brand, and I just want to remind you that this is not in any way intuitive counseling as it would be in a session with a human being. What we're doing here is we're using our intuition to clear away our own prejudices or prior assumptions and re-looking with fresh eyes at a human being that already puts themselves in the public eye. And from that, just exercising our intuition to see if we can see beyond the obvious, perhaps look behind what is presented and try to get an idea of the real person or the soul behind the public face. For some of these people, it's really easy because they really put themselves out there. And then some people, it's more challenging. Russell Brand's one of those people who's really put himself out there. Really put himself out there. And obviously an indigo, no question. Obviously an indigo child and fell into addiction really young as a survival mechanism. I think his first addiction was not a chemical at all, but to adoration. So when he speaks himself about getting up on the stage and all that attention and adoration really gave him the first sense of purpose and meaning and fulfillment. So definitely an indigo, and very interesting case because he also represents the whole addiction cycle of many indigos. So what we know about indigos and sensitives, spiritually connected individuals, is that as children, a lot of us have to shut down or feel we need to shut down elements of ourselves, whether that's the emotional self or the intellectual self, the press, physical well-being. And then even in adulthood, we are not whole. And so we can't deal with the onslaught of what's out there just in terms of the noise of the world and the energetic reception that we're receiving at all times. So we feel like if we've tried to put ourselves into a normal box, we feel like a normal person who's just broken. And we often turn to addiction as a coping mechanism to just stay in the world, to just stay functional. So rather than thinking of addiction as some kind of depraved choice that a person makes, I think it's really helpful to think of it as a survival choice that then bites back. So Russell, obviously an addict, has gone through many iterations in his quest for meaning. But despite the addiction, he really does seem to quest forward. He seems to be expansive and look for more and better. The interesting thing that Russell certainly demonstrates for all indigos is that addiction need not be to a chemical or to adoration or to any kind of substance. Addiction can take many forms. Really, it's whatever completely absorbs our attention and takes us out of the reality we do not want to face. And for many indigos, feeling what's out there, knowing some greater truths that maybe a whole chunk of humanity hasn't cottoned onto yet, makes the idea of what's going on out there pretty terrifying. I've heard it suggested unkindly that Russell is a narcissist, and the classic narcissist, and I would hesitate to make that call. Firstly, because addiction itself is very narcissistic. So addiction goes hand in hand with narcissistic behavior. Because of the origin of addiction, likely in childhood trauma, but also in avoidance. It's mired in fear, and fear-based mindset is really a narcissistic mindset. It's survivalist. So it's on the plains and there's a hungry lion coming, and you're not going to really look at who's around you, you're going to survive first. So if Russell's behavior to some seems really self-involved, that would go hand in hand with the addiction cycle. What is clear about Russell when you look at him, it reminds me of that line from E.E. Cummings in Somewhere I Have Never Traveled. Let me just pull that up. Nothing which we are to perceive in this world equals the power of your intense fragility, whose texture compels me with the color of its countries, rendering death and forever with each breathing. That is one of my favorite poems, and actually reminds me of a friend of mine generally, but that particular stanza, that particular part, really fits Russell because he is larger than life, he is colorful, he is, and yet intensely fragile. His fragility is marked and obvious and glaringly apparent, and yet through all of that he strives. He strives, the courage of that man. He strives forward. And yes, there's the whole hedonistic, was married to Katy Perry thing. And, yes, hedonism was very much a part of the life he stepped into. But if you look at him through the ages, what really seems apparent is his intense fragility. And now he's in the new version of Russell, which is committed Christian devotee type, and there are two possibilities here. Either it's another expression of his addiction, so kind of an addicted to Christianity type thing, or it's genuine and his addiction is just still active. As addictions go, being addicted to Christianity is not a horrible one. At least in that environment, you are surrounded by, hopefully, people who are reaching for spirit, or at least reaching for kindness and reaching for wisdom. And hopefully, in that environment, if that is an expression of addiction, he would certainly be surrounded by upliftment. And one hopes that even if he came to it through an exchange of addiction, he would be exposed to enough in that addictive environment to really cause meaningful change for him and uplift his spirit, which I certainly believe is what he's striving for innately, is freedom of spirit and to be his whole, true, authentic self. How do we know when something like Christianity or any religious expression is an addiction, or it's a truth, or it's a true commitment? The difference that I perceive is there is a degree of brittleness in the addictive form of compliance with a theology. So when a theology becomes like alcohol, when you have to immerse in it 10 times a day and you cling to it with a brittleness that's almost breakable, that tends more in the addiction space. When you meet genuine Christian people who are committed on a heart level, that usually feels gentler. It flows. It comes from a place of more certainty and ease than from a person expressing an addiction through a religion. But like I said, if you're going to choose addictions, being addicted to Christianity is a wonderful choice. There's no negative there. I would hope that over time, the exposure to spiritual teachings and hopefully elevated spiritual people would also have their influence, that his soul would know a greater degree of peace. He certainly does. I mean, maybe it's his own PR, but this modern day martyr sort, he certainly does wear that hat well, where we look at the exposure of young people in today to this loud, very abrasive, very colorful and attractive hedonism and loudness. And he certainly is the poster child for falling into that gap. And so I think for Russell, I would love to see if he would be willing to do Iboga. I haven't heard that he has, but the Iboga journey, which has been so good for many addicts, would be fascinating. And I think that it would make him a better Christian, because if he could sit in his Christianity, in his faith, without the addiction component, I think it would be a much softer embrace and a much more heartfelt and not a rigid embrace. But, and it is a medication, and I don't think that they would have a problem there. So hopefully at some point he will consider something like Iboga, which they're now studying in the US apparently. So there's obviously more work to be done on the root of the addiction itself, and perhaps understanding himself better as an indigo, understanding the evolution of humanity and being on the cusp of that evolution and being a trailblazer in this leap in the evolution of humanity. I think those things would all serve him, to know all of that and to know that he was never broken. He was just a new kind of human. A lot of his experience is in the public domain, so I'm not going to. I do see, though, very strongly when I look at him, his young self, who is still not fully reintegrated into his adult self. So there still feels like there's a part of him that's still rejected by him. Not consciously, I don't think, but at some level. So healing there would absolutely be great, and then a reintegration, and then possibly, I wish he could work with someone like Mata Gabor, who deals with addiction very differently from the 12-step whole idea. But there we go. A definite indigo who harnessed addiction to survive and has been on a roller coaster ride with all of that and in the public eye, and is such a fragile soul. Wow. So very much a typical indigo. Someone that we can really look at and see. So the fragility stands out, especially in the backdrop of his overcompensating for it. So his intense fragility, he masks with the loud, garish, in-your-face behavior to make people look away, which is an interesting response because it doesn't. It just makes people look more. But very interesting soul, definitely someone who is forging a path and giving hope to a lot of people, because there are a lot of addicts who find hope in Russell's story. I just hope he follows his healing journey right through to the end, and his spiritual journey. I hope he keeps following it and never believes that he's at the end of it yet. He just keeps on going. So there are allegations against him in various spaces, which I think are, I do think are part of the political judicial system. Anyone who stood up against the UK state has found themselves at the other end of lawfare of some kind. And so my sense is that everything he's dealing with there is very much in that category. He's openly said how he was a sex addict, for example, and so he doesn't deny that he was promiscuous. But I don't see that he would need to be aggressive in that. And I don't see that in him. I don't see the kind of darkness that comes with that kind of viewing. So there we go. Someone who's a poster child for indigo adult, indigo addict adult, but someone who's made it to here despite all of that. The mere fact that he's still standing and still going strong is really, I mean, come on, all of us indigos know, just that we're still standing and we're still upright and we're still carrying on. That in itself is a thing of celebration and beauty. So we wish him well, and I hope that when you looked again through the eyes of intuitive, gentle, compassionate assessment, that you saw something different, perhaps. And let me know if there's something that you saw that you thought was particularly interesting. And we will carry on in the comments. Thank you, dear ones, and remember to love always.